When my daughter told her children I had died, I wasn't angry. I was devastated, but not surprised. I suppose it's easier to kill someone off than to explain why you've buried them emotionally. For 8 years, I sent birthday cards to my grandkids, never got a reply. Just once, I wanted to hear, "Thanks, Grandpa." Instead, I heard from a neighbor that I didn't exist in their world, not even as a name, just dead. By the time I learned the truth, I had become a ghost, haunting a life I once called family. But ghosts remember. Ghosts ache. I watched from afar as my grandkids played in parks I used to push their mother through. I stood outside birthday parties I wasn't invited to, gripping a wrapped gift I'd never get to give. I knew I had been absent. I knew I had failed, but I didn't know I had been erased. And yet, the story didn't end there. Because the person who brought me back wasn't my daughter. It was a child. A letter in crayon. 4 words that rewrote everything. I know your grandpa. What followed will break your heart, restore your faith, and make you question who really gets to bury the past. Before I take you into this story of silence, shame, and something almost like forgiveness, stay with me. You may think you know what happened, but trust me, no one saw the ending coming. 8 years. That's how long I kept sending birthday cards to 2 children I'd never met. Each envelope carefully addressed in block letters. My shaky hands tracing over the zip code of a house I'd only seen once, parked across the street like a coward. Inside the cards, I always included a crisp $20 bill, a hand-drawn doodle, and a message I never changed. I'm sorry for being gone. I hope you're smiling today. Love, Grandpa. I never got a reply. Not even a return to sender until last month. A thick envelope arrived at my door. Inside, it was every single card I had ever mailed, all unopened. Still sealed, still perfect, still ignored. But they hadn't been lost. The handwriting on the outer envelope was unmistakable. My daughter's. Jenna had gathered 8 years' worth of my attempts to connect and returned them like a cold statement. You were never invited. Not once. Not now. Not ever. I sat on the edge of my kitchen chair, the one with the duct tape holding the cushion together, staring at the pile. The postmarks told their own story. A birthday missed, a holiday forgotten, a growing distance. I should have been angry. Instead, I wept. Not for myself. For what I had let die long before she ever told anyone I had. Most mornings, I wrote in a leather-bound journal. Letters to the grandkids. I never expected they'd read them. But it helped me imagine that someday they might. I wrote as if they were already sitting beside me, asking what life used to be like before smartphones and streaming. I described my truck routes, my favorite diners, the old stray dog who used to follow me to the bus stop when I was a boy. I signed every entry Grandpa Walt, pretending the name still had meaning. The morning after I received the cards, I stared at the pile on my counter like they were tombstones. I ran my fingers across the last one I sent. It was for Rosie, who had just turned 8. A unicorn on the cover, a rainbow inside. My words were still trapped in there, waiting to be read, waiting for a little girl I would probably never meet. And yet, I couldn't let it end like that. There was still breath in my lungs, still something in me that refused to stay buried. 3 days later, I packed a duffel bag, drove 5 hours, and rented a cheap motel in the same city Jenna lived in. I knew where they lived. I'd never forgotten. I used to send packages around holidays, small toys, or books I thought the kids might enjoy. They never responded, but the addresses never changed. Part of me believed they'd welcome me someday. Another part suspected they never even knew I existed. I needed to see the truth for myself. I needed to know whether I had a chance at rewriting this story, or if I was simply scribbling over ink that had long since dried. I found a job posting for a mobile IT technician, freelance, no questions asked. I printed a fake badge, slipped on a collared shirt, and knocked on their neighbor's door 2 houses down. The Smiths needed their router replaced. I made small talk while pretending to diagnose the problem, all the while stealing glances across the yard. Jenna's house hadn't changed much. White siding, navy shutters, tricycle on the porch. A life I'd never been invited into. But fate has a cruel sense of timing. As I walked to my car, I saw them. 2 kids coming home from school, backpacks bouncing, Rosie and Jack. I recognized Rosie from an old photograph Jenna's college roommate once posted on Facebook. She had her mother's walk, head held high, like she was always thinking of 5 things at once. I froze behind a parked van, heart pounding like a teenager sneaking out past curfew. I wasn't ready to say anything. I didn't even know what to say. Then I heard her speak. "I think he's the one. The guy I told you about," Rosie whispered to her friend beside her. "The one your mom hates?" the other girl asked. "Yeah. She says he's bad and dead. But he doesn't look dead to me." I ducked out of sight before they could see me watching. My breath caught in my throat. Bad and dead. That's what Jenna had told them. I sat in my car for an hour, gripping the steering wheel like it owed me answers. My chest ached, not from surprise, but from confirmation. I had always feared she'd written me out of their lives. I just never thought she'd do it so literally. But then came the twist. Those 7 words from Rosie. "But he doesn't look dead to me." That one sentence kept replaying in my head all night. I wasn't sure if it meant she suspected something, or just had a child's intuition that stories didn't always make sense. Maybe she saw something in me. Familiarity, curiosity, or just plain defiance. Whatever it was, it cracked open a door I thought had been welded shut. A sliver of light. I decided then I'd find a way in. Even if it was only through the eyes of a child who hadn't been told the full story. The mind doesn't always forget in clean breaks. Some memories fade like old film. Blurry, uneven, full of missing frames. Others vanish in an instant, stolen by trauma before they can ever be formed. That's what happened to me the summer Jenna turned 9. The accident was stupid. A tired man behind the wheel of a semi. Late night rain. A deer. A bend too sharp. I woke up 2 days later in a hospital I didn't recognize, hooked to machines, with no idea who the people at my bedside were. For weeks, I couldn't remember much of anything. My routes, my name, let alone my family. They told me I had retrograde amnesia, likely temporary. "Your memory will come back gradually," the nurse said, smiling like she believed it. My ex-wife didn't smile. She visited once, looked me over like I was a stranger, and left. She never came back. By the time I could walk again, I asked about Jenna. No one had answers. Her mother had moved. No forwarding address, no phone number, not even a note. Just gone. For years, I wondered if she thought I disappeared by choice. That I'd vanished the way men sometimes do, on purpose, out of cowardice or disinterest. I wrote letters, mailed them to old addresses, to her school, to mutual friends. I never heard back. Eventually, I stopped sending. I went back to work. I took long-haul jobs across states I barely remembered, slept in truck cabs, avoided small talk. Life became something I carried, not something I lived. But the question never left. Did she think I left her? The answer came years later, unspoken, but loud, in the way she looked at me the first time we locked eyes again, behind that parked van. Contempt, not surprise. Contempt comes from familiarity, from stories passed down too many times. To Jenna, I wasn't a stranger. I was a villain in a story she'd memorized, and I couldn't blame her. Because in her version of our history, I had walked away twice, once as a father, and again as a man too proud to say sorry. She was wrong about the second part, but I didn't know the whole truth either. 17 years old. That's how old she was when she tried to write to me. A letter, handwritten, tear-stained. She'd kept it tucked away for weeks, debating whether to send it. When she finally did, it never reached me. I didn't learn about it until decades later. That letter never left her house. Her mother found it first, tucked beneath her pillow. She read it, told Jenna she'd mailed it, then tore it up and threw it away. I wouldn't know any of this until long after Rosie was born. To Jenna, that unanswered letter was the second abandonment. She never knew I'd never received it. Never knew that I might have flown across the country if I had. That I would have sat on her doorstep with a dozen sorries in my hand. She believed I chose silence. I believed she chose silence. And in that silence, we built our walls. She became a mother. I became a ghost. She taught her kids that I had died. I pretended I already had. But lies, even well-meant ones, rot. And sometimes children smell the decay before adults ever notice. When Rosie whispered to her friend that I didn't look dead, I felt the first crack in the coffin I'd been sealed in. She saw through the story. Maybe not all of it, but enough to question. It made me think, what else had Jenna been told as a child? What stories had she been fed about me by a woman who once told me she wished I'd stayed in a coma? Maybe Jenna was hurt not just by my absence, but by how it had been framed, turned into a tale of willful abandonment, a clean narrative, one that protected her from complexity, but cost her something deeper, the chance to decide for herself. I could never undo what had happened, couldn't rewrite the years I missed or the birthday parties I never attended. But maybe, just maybe, I could add a new chapter. One written by truth, not assumption. The next morning, I walked into a used bookstore 3 blocks from their school. I bought 2 sketchbooks, some crayons, and a paperback copy of The Little Prince. I wrote a short note in the front cover. For the girl who sees more than she's told. Love, Grandpa. I signed it with only a W. Then I waited near the library's Lost and Found. If the past had stolen our first chance, maybe this time, I could build something from the pieces left behind. The park was quiet that morning. A few kids kicked soccer balls along the grass, their laughter echoing in bursts. I sat on the same bench I had for 3 days straight, gripping a small brown paper bag in my lap like it contained something holy. In a way, it did. Inside was a storybook and a sketchpad and hope. I didn't know if she'd come, but she did. Same time as before. Same backpack, purple with a frayed zipper. She had a habit of skipping every 3rd step, just like her mother used to. She spotted me, paused. I waved, not too eager, not too familiar. Hi, she said cautiously. I cleared my throat. Hey there, I think I've seen you here before. You have, she said. Then after a pause, my mom says I shouldn't talk to strangers. Smart girl. Well, that's good advice, I replied. I'm actually an old friend of your mom's, from way back. She tilted her head. Like high school? Even earlier. I knew her when she was about your age. My throat tightened. She used to wear her hair in 2 big braids and had a habit of picking all the marshmallows out of her cereal. That earned me a small smile. What's your name? I asked. Rosie. I already knew, but hearing it from her mouth felt like discovering it anew. I handed her the bag. I found this at a bookstore and thought of you. It's just a story, I added quickly, about a little prince who lives on a tiny planet, but he asks big questions, the kind that matter. She opened it slowly, flipping past the inscription. What's your name? She asked. I hesitated. Walter. Her eyes brightened. That's my grandpa's name. Well, was. He died before I was born. I felt like the air had been punched out of my chest, but I smiled anyway. Funny coincidence, I said. She flipped through the sketch pad. Did you draw these? Some, I said. Some were drawn by a man named Walter. Long ago. She studied the pages. Simple line drawings of trucks, dogs, lighthouses, coffee cups, coffee, a quiet man's life, in black ink. I wish he was still alive, she said softly. I blinked hard. Me too, I whispered. I wanted to tell her, so badly, that he was alive, that he was sitting right next to her, that he had missed her every day of her life. But I didn't. Because lies, even well-meaning ones, had already done too much damage, and I wouldn't risk another. Then it happened. Rosie. The voice cracked across the park like a whip. Jenna. She marched toward us, her face pale with fury, her steps clipped and urgent. Rosie stood up, clutching the sketch pad to her chest. Get away from her, Jenna snapped. Mom, he's just... I said get away. I stood slowly, hands raised. Jenna. Don't say my name. Her eyes blazed. For a moment, I saw the little girl she once was, afraid and furious, all at once. I didn't mean any harm, I said. I was just... You were just what? Lurking? Pretending to be someone else? You think this is okay? She grabbed Rosie's hand, yanking her back. You stay the hell away from my kids. I didn't argue, didn't defend myself. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out something wrapped in plastic, a page from a journal I'd torn the night before. Taped to it was a photocopy of a letter, a 17-year-old's handwriting, still smudged with tears. I never got this, I said quietly, holding it out. She looked at it like it might burn her. What is that? A letter you wrote. Years ago. It never reached me. Your mother found it, and she never sent it. Her hand wavered, then dropped. You're lying. I'm not. Jenna, I never stopped looking for you. After the accident, I didn't know where you were. I would have come, I swear. She didn't speak. I didn't push. I turned to go. Wait. Her voice was different now, smaller, wounded. She took the letter, her fingers trembling. I remember writing this, she said. I sat on my bed, rewrote it 3 times. I gave it to Mom to send. I nodded. She shook her head. She told me you never wrote back, that you didn't care. I couldn't speak. Rosie looked up at her mom. Why would Grandma lie? Jenna didn't answer. She just stared at the letter, like it was written in another language. I don't know what's real anymore, she whispered. I know, I said. Me neither. And with that, I walked away, the sound of my granddaughter's voice ringing behind me. Mom, I think he's telling the truth. Jenna didn't sleep the night she found the letter. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at the page like it had teeth. Every word of her 17-year-old self stared back at her, raw, pleading, full of confused hope. She remembered writing it vividly, how she rewrote it 3 times, how her hands shook, how she handed it to her mother and asked her to mail it. She remembered waiting. Weeks turned to months. No reply. She told herself she should have known better, but he'd never received it. And now, all those years later, her daughter had been sitting on a bench with the man Jenna had written to, completely unaware. She didn't tell her mother right away. She waited until Saturday, when the kids were at a friend's house. The apartment was too quiet, too sharp with judgment. Her mother didn't deny it. She just said, "I thought I was protecting you." "By lying," Jenna snapped, "you were already broken. He didn't deserve you." Jenna stared at her mother, searching for something familiar, but all she saw was a woman who had rewritten their past with stubborn precision. "I was broken because you told me he didn't want me. I was broken because you gave me silence and called it truth." Her mother didn't reply. She walked to the sink and started washing dishes, as if the conversation had ended. Jenna left without another word, but the truth didn't bring clarity. It only stirred more questions. What if everything she believed was wrong? What if Walter had tried harder than she ever knew? What if, beneath her anger, there was a girl still waiting for her father to show up? She wasn't ready to forgive. Not yet. But the sharpness in her chest had dulled, replaced by something she hadn't felt in years: confusion. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of the school library, Rosie found something unexpected, wedged behind a row of old biographies. A worn leather journal. No label. No school markings. Inside were entries, written in careful cursive, dated over the last few months. Stories, reflections, sketches of park benches, of a girl with a ponytail, of a little boy playing with toy trucks. Her eyes widened as she turned the pages. One entry stopped her cold. "I saw her again today. Her laugh is Jenna's laugh, her stubborn chin. I wonder if she knows she reminds me what hope feels like." At the bottom of the page, Grandpa W. She closed the journal slowly. So that's who he was. She remembered his eyes. How kind they were. How he didn't flinch when Mom yelled. How he called The Little Prince a story that asked grown-ups to look up. That night, Rosie didn't say anything to her mom. Instead, she pulled out her notebook and wrote a letter in green crayon. "Dear Grandpa W., I know who you are. I won't tell Mom, but I want to see you again. Love, Rosie P.S. Jack knows too, but he promised not to say anything." She folded the note carefully and handed it to the librarian the next day. "It's for the man who left the notebook," she said. The librarian nodded, confused but agreeable. Walter received the letter on Monday. The librarian flagged him down and said, "One of the kids said this was for you." He read the words 3 times. By the 4th, his eyes were too wet to finish. "Dear Grandpa." 2 words he never thought he'd read in his lifetime. He held the paper to his chest like it might disappear. He walked to the park that evening, just in case. She didn't come, but he didn't mind. He sat there anyway, watching the sunset over the playground. He came back the next day, and the day after. On Thursday, Rosie appeared. She didn't run to him. She walked slowly, cautiously, but without fear. She sat beside him on the bench and handed him a cookie. "I told Mom I was at Emma's," she said casually. "I kind of am. Emma's mom is here. Somewhere." Walter chuckled. though his throat was tight. Thank you for the letter. You're not mad I found your notebook. Rosie, he said gently, that notebook wasn't lost. I left it there on purpose. She looked at him, puzzled. I thought maybe one day someone would want to know the truth. I do, she said. Then after a pause, why didn't you ever come see us before? I tried, he admitted, but sometimes grown-ups think they're doing the right thing by staying away. Were you scared? He smiled sadly, terrified. She leaned her head on his arm. It was the smallest gesture, but it shattered something in him. I won't tell Mom, she said. Not yet. She's still mad, but maybe not forever. He nodded. That was enough. They sat in silence for a while, watching the wind play with the trees. I drew you something, he said, pulling out a folded piece of paper. It was a sketch of Rosie on the park bench, reading The Little Prince. She smiled. You're good. I've had a lot of practice, he said. Drawing people I miss. She looked up at him. Well, she said, maybe now you can draw people who are here. The backyard was strung with paper lanterns, their soft glow brushing over picnic tables and folding chairs. Balloons danced lazily in the breeze, and the scent of grilled hot dogs lingered in the air. It was Rosie's birthday, 10 years old. A big number for a little girl who already carried too many secrets. Jenna had been hesitant about inviting me. She never said the words outright, but I knew. She called 3 days earlier, her voice thin with restraint. I'm throwing a small thing for Rosie on Saturday, she said. Some friends from school. You can come if you want. I said yes, without hesitation. But I understood the conditions. I wasn't Grandpa. I was just Mom's old friend Walter. That's how Jenna introduced me when I arrived. I smiled, shook hands, passed out paper plates. I didn't care what they called me. I was there. Rosie ran to me as soon as she saw me, handing me a party hat and a juice box. You made it, she whispered. Wouldn't miss it, miss. The party buzzed with laughter, kids shouting, music humming from a Bluetooth speaker. I watched Jenna move between groups of parents, her face calm but distant. She kept glancing at me, never quite making eye contact, never quite turning away. When it came time for the cake, everyone gathered in a circle. Rosie beamed behind 10 flickering candles. Jack stood beside her, bouncing on his toes. Okay, Jenna said, clapping her hands. Time to make a wish. But before Rosie could blow them out, she spoke. I already got my wish. Everyone looked at her. She pointed at me. Thanks, Mom, for letting us meet Grandpa. Silence fell. A collective pause, so long it could have broken time. One mother blinked. Another father lowered his phone, mid-photo. Someone coughed. Jenna froze. She stood up slowly, eyes locked on Rosie. Sweetheart, she started, but Rosie wasn't done. I know you didn't want us to know, but I'm glad we do. He's nice and funny, and he remembers things about you I didn't even know. Jenna opened her mouth again, then stopped. She looked at Rosie, then at me. Her expression softened, but her eyes shimmered with something heavier than anger, heavier than shame, recognition. She sat back down, didn't speak, didn't argue, just let it happen. After the candles were blown out, after the presents were opened and the guests filtered out with balloons and thank you bags, Jenna found me by the fence, stacking plastic cups. She knows, I said quietly. She's known, Jenna replied, longer than I realized. She's smart. She's 10. She's still smarter than most people I know. That earned a thin smile. We stood in silence for a few seconds before she spoke again. When I was her age, she said, I used to stand by the window every Sunday afternoon, just in case you'd show up. I swallowed hard. I wish I had. I used to think you didn't come because you didn't care. Now I think maybe you didn't know how. I didn't, I admitted. And then, when I did, I thought it was too late. It almost was. Another pause. Then she turned to face me. If you really love me, she said, and I'm not asking you to prove it, just if you do, then give me time. Let me figure this out at my pace. Let me rebuild this from where I am, not where you want me to be. I nodded. Of course. No guilt, no pressure, just space. You've got it. She nodded once, then walked away, into the house, into the noise of cleaning up, into her own quiet process. The next morning, I left a package at their front door. No note, just a flat box, wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a painting. It showed the four of them, Jenna, her mother, Rosie, and Jack, standing on a hill under a golden sky. Rosie was holding a kite. Jack had a book in his hands. Jenna looked straight ahead, not smiling, not frowning, just real. To the side of the hill, behind a tree, was a man, hands in pockets, watching them from a distance. Me. Taped to the back of the canvas was a slip of paper in my handwriting. You don't have to put me in the picture yet. I'll wait here, just outside the frame, until you're ready to invite me in. 2 days later, when I returned to the park bench, I found Rosie waiting. She was holding the painting. You forgot something, she said. Then she pointed to the corner. A new figure had been added in crayon, next to the family. He's part of the picture now, she said. The apartment Walter moved into was modest. A one-bedroom with creaky floors and yellowing blinds. But the view from the window showed a sliver of the park where his grandchildren played. That alone made it priceless. It had been nearly a year since Rosie's birthday, a quiet year, marked not by declarations or breakthroughs, but by slow, steady breath. Jenna didn't call often. There were no holiday invitations, no grand gestures. But the silence was no longer barbed. It was just space, shared, respected. Walter didn't force his presence. He didn't knock or text. Every Sunday, he simply walked to the park at 3 p.m. sharp, sat on the same bench, brought crackers for the ducks and a paperback for himself. Sometimes Rosie came. Sometimes Jack tagged along, dragging his Lego creations and babbling about science facts. Sometimes they just waved from the distance. Jenna occasionally passed by, eyes hidden behind sunglasses, nodding without stopping. And that was enough. Until one Sunday in late autumn. The air was crisp, laced with wood smoke and fallen leaves. Walter had just sat down when Rosie appeared, her red scarf trailing behind her like a streamer. Hey, she said, catching her breath. Mom said to give you this. She held out a small white envelope. Walter took it slowly, like it might disappear. He opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No logo, no decoration, just a sentence, handwritten in blue ink. If you're free, come to dinner tomorrow. He looked up. Rosie was already grinning. She made lasagna, she said, like that sealed the deal. Walter nodded, trying not to let his voice break. I'll bring dessert. The next evening, he arrived at Jenna's house 5 minutes early and spent those minutes staring at the door before knocking. It opened before his hand touched it. Jack was there, holding a toy lightsaber and chewing a carrot stick. You're not Grandpa. You're the guy who always brings cake, Walter smiled. Tonight I brought both. Inside, the house was warm, lived in. A faint scent of garlic and butter drifted from the kitchen. Jenna emerged, wiping her hands on a towel. "Hi," she said simply. "Hi," he replied. She didn't hug him, didn't flinch either, just gestured toward the dining room. Tables set. They didn't talk much. Walter poured water, passed napkins, and sliced the garlic bread with care. The kids chattered through mouthfuls of pasta. Jenna refilled glasses. It could have been any dinner in any house. But for Walter, it was everything. He told a joke about a squirrel stealing his sandwich last week at the park. Jack laughed so hard, he snorted milk through his nose. Rosie rolled her eyes with affection. Jenna didn't laugh, but she smiled. It wasn't about the joke. It was about the man telling it and the fact that he was still showing up. After dessert, Jenna handed him a tin of leftovers. "For tomorrow," she said. Walter took it like an heirloom. "I'll see you next Sunday?" Rosie asked, already knowing the answer. "Wouldn't miss it," he said. As he stepped onto the porch, Jenna followed. She stood there for a moment, arms crossed against the night chill. "I don't know if I'm ready to say everything," she said, "but I'm not angry anymore. Not like I was." He nodded. "You don't have to be ready. I'm not going anywhere." She looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, she didn't see a man who had disappeared. She saw the man who had come back and waited quietly until she opened the door. "Good night, Dad," she said. Walter didn't reply right away. He watched her disappear inside, watched the porch light flicker, then fade. The next morning, he added a new entry in his journal. Just 3 lines. Sunday dinner. Jenna made lasagna. I'm in the picture now. He tucked the journal away, along with the envelope Rosie had delivered. There were no promises of perfection, no dramatic speeches or grand reconciliation. Just this. A girl who once believed her grandfather was dead now laughed at his old man jokes. A woman who once burned letters now passed the garlic bread without flinching. And a man who once sat alone on a park bench now had a seat at the table. Some things are lost, but not everything stays gone. Some things find their way back, quietly, slowly, wrapped in lasagna and laughter. In time, even silence can bloom. And as Rosie once wrote in her journal, tucked between sketches of stars and kites, Grandpa used to be dead, at least in Mom's heart. But now he's alive again, not just because he's here, but because he stayed, and because he waited, and because he listened.